Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today is episode 17 of Self Pub Sunday, and today we're joined by Mark Cushen. Did I say your name right, Mark?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, awesome. Mark is author of Little White Hands, which is book one in the Garland Great Heart series. And a little bit later on, we'll talk about the future of that series. But I am right now in the middle of book one, and I am absolutely loving it. I can't wait to see what happens in the second half of the book. Um, as an icebreaker, while people kind of trickle in here and get settled in, Mark, how do your world is so different than our, normal everyday world where you have seasons fighting each other and you have essentially a talking stick of wood. How do you get your mind into that world to write things in your world?
I think mainly just from the the stuff that I consume myself. I like reading stories that are like Little White Hands, like the kind of whimsical, really fantastical stuff. My favourite book ever is The Hobbit. So if you've read that, you know kind of where I get some of my inspirations from. Um, and yeah, I just whenever I'm kind of in writing mode, I try and take in as much um, other stories like that as I can. You know, The Hobbit, Narnia, other books with a similar sort of tone, and I don't know, just it just drops me right in.
That's your real world, and this world is just the make believe world.
I wish that was.
Awesome. Speaking of The Hobbit and Narnia, I want to talk a little bit about your writing career. So, have you always wanted to be a writer, Mark, or was there a certain moment in your life where you're like, this is what I want to do?
I haven't always wanted to be a writer. No, the first time I wrote anything, I think I was maybe 10 or 11, a long time ago. Um, and I really loved reading the Goosebumps books, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And I'm not sure why, but one day I just decided to write my own Goosebumps story, like a really short fan fiction thing, back when I was at 10 years old. And um, I don't have them anymore. I wish I did. Just I can see what they're like now. But um, and then I don't think I didn't write anything again for years after that. Um, and then it was when I first saw Lord of the Rings in the cinema, the Fellowship of the Ring, and for some reason it just made me want to tell my own stories like that. Not to make movies, just to make my own stories. And because I had written before, I just thought, well, I'll try writing something, and it just kind of went from there. Here we are.
So, speaking of inspirations, you mentioned Hobbit and Narnia and Lord of the Rings. I was wondering if you had any other writing inspirations when you write your books.
Um, Not really, no. I mean, a big one was the Harry Potter books. When I started reading them, it was just blowing my mind. Like, I couldn't believe that you know, write stories like that, just so weird and whimsical. And um, yeah, that was a big one for me. Harry Potter books. I liked especially how at the start of that series, it started off kind of younger and more whimsical, and it kind of got darker as they went on. And that's something that I kind of took on board for the series that I'm writing now. That's something that you'll see happening in my book series as well.
Awesome. So I want to talk spoiler-free chat about Little White Hands for those out there that haven't yet read Little White Hands or are in the middle of it like me. Um, can you give us your elevator pitch for what Little White Hands is all about?
Yeah, so it is about a young boy called Galen, He is a kitchen boy, works in the kitchen of the castle in this kingdom of Phelan, and he dreams about becoming a knight one day, and he's kind of led to believe that that's just not possible. Boys like him can't be knights. And as fate would have it, one day he's walking home, and this kind of adventure is just thirsty for him. He kind of finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe the right place at the right time, depending on how we want to look at it. And he just ends up going on this great big adventure and trying to save the world, and meets a bunch of weird and fantastical characters along the way. Some of them friendly, some of them not friendly. He gets into all sorts of trouble, and yeah.
Awesome. So, what makes Garland's story, A Little White Hand, different than other coming of age stories?
Um, um, well, one thing I wanted to try and show with Garland is that like he's not, you know, a chosen one. He's not, this overpowered person. He's just a wee boy, and one thing I wanted to show is that like he can't really do it on his own. A lot of stories like this, the main character seems really overpowered and stuff, and Garland just isn't. He's got friends to help him along the way, without him, he wouldn't get to the end. And I just wanted to make that really prevalent that he needs help. He's just 11 years old. Like it wouldn't be real. To say realistic is silly about a story with dragons and witches and stuff in it, but it needs to kind of be believable in the world of that. If this young boy is going to go on this adventure, this dangerous adventure all over the world, he's not going to be able to do it himself. He's going to need help, and I wanted to show that he is just a young boy at the end of the day. He's scared. He doubts himself. He relies on others, and I think I hope I've done a good enough job getting that across.
So, The Hobbit is a big inspiration for you in your writing, but where did the idea for Little White Hands come from?
So that started um, maybe 10 years ago. It first came into my mind when I first started writing. It was originally just a short story. I was writing a collection of like short fairy tales at the time, um, and Little White Hands. The basic premise was pretty simple. It was about this young kitchen boy who he sees like a princess getting kidnapped, and he goes on this quest to rescue. It was really simple, um, but over time, as I started to write other stories in the collection, Little White Hands kind of got pushed into the background just because it was too simple, and I was preferring the other stuff that I was writing more to that, and it just kind of got pushed into a folder and gathered digital dust for a few years. Um, and then it was maybe about 5 years ago, and I was just looking for something new. I had found that other stories that I was writing at the time were becoming a bit stale, and I just kind of wanted to get things going again. And I just discovered this old story that I'd been writing, and picked it up again, and it just kind of snowballed. Like I don't know why I came coming back at it a few years later with a fresh mind. It took on this mind of its own and became so much bigger than what it was originally. And yeah, it turned out to be just a short story, just a few pages long, into a 300 page novel.
So, when you were writing the short story that then became Little White Hands,
Yeah.
did the characters come first to you, or did the story itself come first?
The first thing, the kitchen boy idea was the first thing. It wasn't called Garland at the time. I can't even remember what his name was. I actually got the kitchen boy idea from um, Arthurian legends. I've always been interested in stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and one of the Knights of the Round Table, Sir Gareth, I think his name is.
Mhm.
Um, he comes to one of the stories. He comes to Camelot dreaming of being a knight, and he comes into the castle disguised as a kitchen boy, and he gets roped into all these adventures. And a lot of the older knights, they kind of mock him and they call him bare hands, which I thought was quite interesting. So I remember seeing that and thinking that was quite a cool idea about this. Just this wee unassuming guy in the kitchen and goes on these adventures and gets, underestimated and looked down on and goes on to become something bigger and better. So it always, that idea was the very first thing. And that's pretty much the only thing from the original story that's still there. It's just the name and this concept of a young kitchen boy. Everything else about the story is completely different. Like it's complete 180 from what it was.
Awesome. Now, I want to go into spoiler chat and talk some details. So, if anyone's out there that's watching this live or watching the playback of this, and you don't want to be spoiled for Little White Hands, press pause, go read the book, and then come back and watch the rest of this. This is your fair warning for spoilers. So, with that said, now this is where people have said are the really tough questions. So my favorite character in Little White Hands, so far where I'm at, is Old Face. I love the humor that he brings into the book, and he's kind of like Garland's almost guardian angel in wooden block form. Who are your favorite characters, or who are the easiest characters for you to write?
One of my favourite characters comes towards the end. He's a big Highland warrior character. I won't say much about him because I don't want to spoil it too much. But I don't know why he's my favourite. I think it's because he's kind of based on Scottish culture. He's a big Highland warrior, like where I'm from. I just like that he becomes like the muscle towards the end, and I just really like it was really fun to write. Some good action scenes involving him, which I really enjoyed. And he's a good kind of big brotherly relationship with Garland that I enjoyed writing. So you've got him to look forward to. He's one of my favourites. But as far as the easiest to write, maybe Garland himself, just because like I was an 11-year-old boy once, so I could just get into his mindset and him wanting to be a knight. Funnily enough, when I was a wee boy, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up too. I wanted to be a knight as well. So there is a little bit of me, and not too much, but a little bit of me in Gavin. So I think that just makes him easier to write. Some of the other characters were harder to write. Old Face was quite difficult to write because I'm not an old, wise sage like him. But yeah, like a lot of people have told me that Old Face is one of their favourite characters as well, just because of this mentor relationship he has with Garland. Picks him up when he's feeling low and encourages him and stuff. So yeah, I like
that. It's a great twist on kind of the mentor trope.
Yeah.
Especially once he reveals his true identity to Garland, he kind of really takes on that mentor role that Garland doesn't have in his life. But you don't see mentors as an old soul locked in a block of wood ever. So it was a nice twist on that trope.
Yeah, I was, Garland does have a teacher at the start of the book and another kind of wizard, and there was a time at the very beginning where he was going to go with Garland, but I just think it's been done so many times. It's Gandalf obviously comes to mind, Dumbledore, all these kind of Merlin. So I didn't want to do the same thing. But I do like that trope. I like the trope of the kind of old wise mentor kind of helping the young character along. So I did want to do some version of it. just I want to put my own spin on it. So I
I love it.
can walk away is what came to mind.
And I am really looking forward to meeting our Highland warrior because
Yeah,
people that have watched my channel before and interacted with me know that Scotland is a near dear place in my heart. And um, in recent years, I've become mildly obsessed with the Highlands,
yeah.
even though my family's originally from the Lowlands.
Uh-huh.
Um, but just doing, I have a MFA in creative nonfiction writing, and my half of my thesis was about my family history in Scotland. And so just digging into that made me slightly obsessed with Scotland and Scottish history. Um,
It's a really nice place. I'm not from the Highlands. I'm more central, but I do go up to the Highlands quite a lot, the Twine Hills and stuff, and it's like a completely different world up there. It's amazing.
it just seems like a whole different world.
Yeah, really is.
So, on the reverse side of things, who was the hardest character for you to write?
The hardest character to write. Maybe Trickster, the fox, Gavin Newts, because he's really sarcastic and kind of snarky and witty, and that's not really me. Um, I can be sometimes, but yeah, and just he's kind of like the comic relief as well sometimes. The more serious moments, he kind of adds a little bit of levity to it, and yeah, trying to get into his head is quite tricky sometimes. Like there were some scenes where I didn't. They were too serious. And I didn't really want to brighten them up, but that's kind of the role that he serves. So it was trying to find a way to make him serve his purpose without really, you know, changing things too much. And it's quite tricky at times to write him, but he's one of my favourite characters actually. And the end turned out really.
So, I want to switch to talking about scenes now.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes so far that I've come across is kind of the Dryad funeral scene, where one of their elders dies and essentially becomes part of the wood. And they play the song for him, and then Garland goes back to the seasons and gets the leaf of the dryad that has just passed. I thought that was a beautiful scene, but I was wondering what are some of your favorite scenes to, that were to write?
Um, I really liked the scene in the farmhouse with the scarecrow, um, by the scarecrow. I really liked that chapter. It's quite ominous at the start. Not much goes on. There was no action or anything like that really. And I liked how it ended as well. I liked the kind of ambiguous. That was an intentional thing. I didn't want to outright kill the scarecrow because
Mhm.
I really liked him. I really liked making him, and so I didn't want to write a death scene or anything for him because it was too hard. But I also um, yeah, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen to him, so I left that ambiguous, and I quite liked writing that um, ambiguity and a bit of mystery. I've never really written anything kind of mystery before, so that was enjoyable for me. That whole chapter, I really liked that whole chapter. Um, really enjoyed that.
So, on the other side of things, what was the hardest scene for you to write?
Maybe the end, which I really don't want to get into too much. I don't want to spoil too much. It's a good happy ending, it's a cheerful ending, but it was hard to just know when to stop, when to kind of bring things to a close, because I was just enjoying it so much and kind of wanted to keep going. And yeah, I think that was probably the hardest. Um, Not for any real reason other than just I didn't really know how to bring it home because there's just so much more I
Right.
would like to have done. But I think that's part of the trick is just the whole writing thing was just known than to call it a day.
So, what do you hope for readers to come away after reading Little White House? White Hands?
I just hope they find a, a story that they can get lost in and kind of helps them forget about real life for a while. And I know that's when I read books, that's what I'm reading for, just to shut the world off and get lost to somebody else for a while. And there's some kind of lessons in there about stepping outside the comfort zone and doing the hard thing and hope and courage and all these other kind of um, things that you see in coming of age stories. And I mean, a lot of them are almost cliche, but they're cliche for a reason because they're real and they work. And I would just like for uh, people reading my books to get the kind of those same messages from what I write down.
So, now I want to talk a little bit about the future of your series. So, this is book 1.
Yeah.
We've got book 2 out there.
Yeah.
Where else is it? How big do you imagine this series being? Where do you see the series going?
Well, this series is just a trilogy, so book 2 is out already. Phelan's Champion, that's book 2. That came out at the end of May, so just a couple of months ago. I'm now in the process of writing book 3, to be the conclusion. Whether or not that's the last time I ever go back to this world, I don't know. I have been thinking about other stories recently. Whether or not I want to set them in this world or with these same characters, I'm really not sure. I've got an idea of maybe doing a short story collection set in this same world, maybe with some of the same characters, maybe not. It's all still kind of up in the air just now, but for now I'm just focusing mainly on book 3 and kind of bringing the series to a satisfying conclusion.
I would love to see a short story of Old Face, but back when he was advisor to the king before he became a block of wood.
Okay, well,
Just putting that out there. No pressure.
you never know.
So do you have any other writing projects outside of the Garland Greatheart series that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, the other one that I kind of mentioned briefly earlier, the short story collection of like short fairy tales and stuff, the one that like Little White Hands was originally part of. I started writing that years and years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and it just kind of fell to the wayside as Little White Hands kind of took over. So maybe when I'm finished this series, I'll go back to that. But other than that, that's all. I don't like to get too far ahead of myself because you just don't know what's around the corner. So it's I could be full of big ideas and just never go anywhere. The ideas just come and go. Sometimes you get an idea for a project that's really good and I'm really excited about it at the start, and then just the more you get into it, it's just not really doing anything. I don't like to get too far ahead of myself. We'll finish off Garland's story, and then see what happens.
Awesome. Well, Mark, those are all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we covered everything. This is kind of my first podcast, so I'm not really know what to expect, but we touched on everything. I'm really happy with how it went.
Yeah, well, you did great. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to everyone out there who either watched this live, or if you're watching this back on replay, if you have questions for Mark, put them in the comments below and I'll get your questions out to Mark so we can get answers for you. And, join us next month. We'll have Delaney Andrews and Andrew Meredith on talking about their books. I'm really excited for that. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.
Okay, thank you.